Hey guys and welcome back. I hope your half term and revision are going well. As I was looking through the grade 9 kind of questions, I realised that the most recent papers aren't that difficult, so what I've done is I've gone through and I've found 9 grade 9 questions which are actually really difficult. And if you're able to follow along with what I'm doing, then that's a really good sign that your revision is on track. So I thought I'd go through these 9 questions one by one, explain the thought processes, that way you can learn from me. I will in the description put a bunch of links to other grade 9 papers just so you can get some more practice. Again, I recommend set 1 and set 2. Set 3 is okay as well, but set 4 is a bit easier in my opinion. So without further ado, let's jump straight into this question. So C is a circle with the centre, the origin, tangent to C through the points minus 20, 0 and 0, 10. Work an equation for C. Now, if I look at this, I have no idea what to do until I actually draw something out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a set of axes, just like so, and then the circle is going to have the centre, so obviously your circle is not going to look as good as mine because I have autocorrect. And I'm just going to put it roughly around here. Then we have a tangent that passes through minus 20, 0 and 0, 10. So minus 20, 0 is of course along the x-axis. And then we have a tangent, and I'm going to autocorrect this again like so, which means that point there must be 0, 10, the y-intercept. Now it's telling me to work out the equation for the circle. And what does the equation of the circle look like? It looks like this. X squared plus y squared equals r squared, where r is the radius of the circle. So all they're actually asking me for is what's the radius of this circle, because the x and y, they're just variables, they stay the same. So we need to work out the radius. Okay, if I draw the radius, now where will I draw the radius? Well, if you think about it, the tangent is going to intersect the circle at a point right around here. So if I draw my radius like so, what I'm thinking, and this is what came to my mind once I drew out this kind of information they've given me, is if I work out the coordinates of this point here, let's say it's 10 and 20, I know it's not, I can then work out the length of that line by just using the length of a line segment formula. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to work out what this point of intersection P is, the coordinates, and I'm going to use that in order to work out R, which means I can sub it straight in. Now, how the hell am I going to do that? Well, to work out coordinates for intersection, what you need to do is know the equation of both of your lines and make them equal to each other. So if I write first for the tangent, we have y equals mx plus c. So we need the gradient, and we actually get given the y-intercept, which is quite rare. So the y-intercept is just 10, so that's nice and easy. The gradient would just be the change in y over the change in x, so it goes from 0 to 10, so 10 minus 0 over 0 minus 20. By the way, these are all calculated questions because the calculator paper is the only one that's left over. So it's 10 over 20, or in other words, a half. So it means my equation for the tangent, which we've already got, is a half x plus 10. Nice and easy. Now, the equation for the radius is also not too bad, but it involves a little bit of a trick that not a lot of students would know. Now, because the radius will meet the tangent at 90 degrees, they're perpendicular to each other, then the gradient is just going to be the negative reciprocal. So that's just going to be minus 2. Also, the radius is going to go right through the centre of the circle, and the coordinates of the centre of the circle are 0, 0. So the y-intercept is 0, which means the equation for the radius is just y equals minus 2x. Now to find the point P, all we need to do is we need to equate this equation with this equation. So minus 2x equals a half x plus 10. What's best? I'm going to minus a half x on both sides. That's minus 5 over 2x equals 10. So minus 5x equals 20. And that means x is equal to minus 4. That's my x coordinate. Does it make sense? Well, yeah, it kind of does, right? Because it's on the left-hand side of the y-axis. Makes sense, it should be lower than 0. That's all good. Now to find out y, all I need to do is sub it into this equation. So y is equal to minus 2 minus 4. So y is equal to 8. So the coordinates of that point are minus 4, 8. And to work out the actual length of that line, the way I do it is I don't bother memorizing the equation because I think the equation is a bit of a waste of time. Instead, if I look at this as a right-angled triangle, like so, the width of that triangle is just going to be the x-coordinate, right? So from 0 to -4, so that's 4 wide. And then the height goes from 0 to 8, that means the height is going to be 8. And so the hypotenuse is just our radius. So that means we're using Pythagoras. 8 squared plus 4 squared equals square root 80. But don't forget, we want r squared, so I'm not even going to bother working out the square root of that. So x squared plus y squared equals root 80 squared, which is just 80. Not bad for a 5-mark question. It is fairly tricky because you have to know what to do. But again, follow the thought process. Always illustrate all of the information that they give you on your diagrams. This right here is a 8-mark in total, so 3 plus 5, probability question. But the probability question itself is actually kind of unique and interesting. So if I have a look at the first part, so zoom in, we have there are only red and yellow sweets in a bag. There are n red sweets and 8 yellow sweets. Sajid is going to take at random a sweet from the bag and eat it. He says the probability it's red is 7/10, but it can't be. But we have to explain why, which is a very interesting question. It's very different to what you may have normally. The idea here is essentially the number of sweets should be an integer, right? So we have n red sweets. It's going to be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. It's going to be an integer. And obviously 8 is an integer as well. However, if we use those two values, I'm willing to bet that our value for n is going to be a fraction. Because just from looking at this, you can probably see that there's no way we could simplify to 7/10 if we have 8 in the denominator. But either way, let's work it out. So if the probability of getting a red is 7/10, then that should equal, well, how do you work out probability? You take the number of red sweets, which is n, over the total number of sweets, which is n plus 8, which equals 7/10. I like to call this cross-multiplying, so you take the denominators of both and just multiply them across. So we get 10n equals 7n plus 8. Then we just need to start the process of simplification. So 10n equals 7n. And don't forget, this is a calculator paper, so if you're not too sure about what you need to, like any of the values, you can just use a calculator to do them. Subtract, so we have 3n equals 56. And that means n is equal to 56/3, which is, it needs to be, n should be a whole number. So it should be integer. But because it's not an integer, it cannot be 7/10 as the probability. Cool. The next one is actually a very, very common question. Just so you know the topic, it's called probability equations. It is considered a grade 9 topic, not a great topic. Probability equations. And I'll show you why in a second. But after he's taken the first sweet out of the bag and eaten it, he's going to take at random a second sweet. Given that the probability that both of them are red is 3/5, work out the number of red sweets. So, in other words, you take the probability of getting one red, and you times it by the probability of getting another red, and that should give you 3/5. So, again, it says both sweets are red, that's why we have red and red. If it said that there was one of each colour, then you'd have to have red and yellow, plus yellow and red. Either way, what's the probability of getting a red on the first try? Well, it's going to be what we wrote here, n over n plus 8. Now, given that we've gotten a red sweet, what's the probability of getting another one? Well, there's one fewer red sweets, and there's one fewer sweets overall. So that would be what it is. Okay? Again, the reason why I've taken away one from the top is because we've taken away one of the red sweets, so it's n minus 1 red sweets left. And it's n plus 7 because it's just n plus 8 take away 1 because we, took away 1. Equals 3/5. I would then, again, this can take a while. I would combine the fractions to make it like this. So when you're timesing, just remember you just times the top and bottom. And then we're going to use the same trick I used before. We're going to cross multiply to get rid of fractions, bring that up and up here. So we have 5n, n minus 1. Equals 3, n plus 8, n plus 7, and then you're solving this quadratic, so it's not too bad afterwards. Now what I'd recommend is if you ever have a number outside the bracket as well, is to expand the brackets but leave it in brackets. So let me show you what I mean. So this left side would be 5n squared minus 5n equals 3, then we have n squared Then we have 8n and 7n, which would be 15n. And then plus the 56 from earlier, because it's 8 times 7. Then we have 5n squared minus 5n, and now we can expand again, so 3n squared. The reason why I do this, and it might seem a bit weird, is when you're under pressure, it's really easy to make silly mistakes. So whenever I've marked exams or assessments or anything like that, the most common thing I see is students making mistakes with the actual, like, expanding or adding numbers together, or, you know, there's a minus when there should be a plus, or a plus when there should be a minus, things like that. Silly things. Most of the marks that you lose in your exam, it's not even because you don't know what the actual answer is. It's going to be because you made a mistake, and that would be what, plus 168? Yeah, because 50 times 3 is 150. Cool. Yeah, cool. Move everything over to the left hand side. So 5n squared, take away 3n squared is 2n squared. Minus 5n minus another 45n. And then just minus 168. Equals 0. And you can divide the whole thing by 2 to make it a bit easier if you want, but it's not really a necessary step. Would be 84. Now, in your exam, I wouldn't bother factorizing. I would just use the quadratic formula personally, or using the button on your calculator which does it for you. So either the quadratic formula or using this button. The reason is because what if it can't be factorized? You don't want to waste your time. You want to be as quick and efficient as possible, and you also want to be as easy as possible. So I know this one can be factorized to what, minus 28 and 3, but either way. See, I said it was quick and easy, and then I'm missing the buttons on the calculator like some kind of... There we are, so we have 28. And of course we're going to get two values because it is a quadratic. Minus 3. And now you have to think, well, which one must it be? Well, because it's the number of sweets, I can't have negative 3 sweets. So instead it's going to be 28. And that's your answer. 8 marks, not too bad. Probability equations, the setup is always the same. It's just get this first part correct. So, you know, is it 2 red sweets or 2 yellow sweets? Or is it one of each? And think of the different ways. And then you're just doing a bunch of cross multiplying and all that fun stuff. This next question is probably the second hardest in the video. I think the first question was the hardest. But I would like to hear your opinions on what you think is the hardest and which one you don't. We given this setup, all of this information is already written on here for us. So we don't have to add to the diagram. Well, we do, but you'll see. And I'm not going to lie, when I first saw this question, I had no idea what to do. So I had to think, okay, instead of... I can't add any information to the diagram because they've done it for me. So now I need to think outside the box. It's why did they give me this information? Now they've given me an angle. And whenever I see an angle, I do like to think of trig. Right? That logically makes sense. But I don't have a right angled triangle. Or do I? Remember, a tangent will meet a radius at 90 degrees. So in other words, we have a big right-angled triangle. Now, okay, I know that I have that, but why do I need it? You know, I'm thinking of like, okay, I can use trig to work out these sides, but which one would I need? Well, I don't think I'll need this side. But the radius is something I've seen in previous questions that we've used, right? I've found the radius before. But why do I need the radius? Well, that would give me the equation of the circle. But why would I need the equation of the circle? Now, here's where it gets interesting. The goal of this question is to find what P is. Now, P lies on the circle, which means if I knew the equation of the circle, I can then sub in my values for P. And if I knew what R was, I could then solve for P. That is the exact thought process I took with this question. I didn't know exactly what to do, if I'm being completely honest with you. So I started using the information they gave me, and I would recommend doing that. Actually use the information they give you. By the way, this is the most important thing. Remember, x is 3p. So the whole of 3p goes in the squared. I've seen people write this, and it breaks my heart every single time. That is why whenever I teach substitution, whenever I do substitution on anything, I always use brackets to make it really clear it's the whole thing being squared. It's not just one thing. This mistake has cost so many people marks. It's the whole of x that's being squared, which in this case is 3p. So be really, really careful with that. With y it doesn't matter because there's nothing in front of the p, but either way. So here's the method. We're going to use trig to find the opposite side here. So in fact, let's label it up. We have opposite, we have the hypotenuse here, and the adjacent, and we're going to use trig to work out the radius, use that to work out the equation of the circle, sub in our coordinates, we can work out p. Job done. So here's the next problem, is it looks like I don't have any sides. I have an angle, but remember, to work out any other side, I need to have one other side, but I do. Because this triangle goes all the way up to this point B here. And that's why they've given me the coordinates of B. Remember the thing I always say. They have to give you enough information to do the question, and they never give you useless information. I've used the 30 degrees. This 16,0, I didn't use that in my substitution. Because we're going to use 16 as our hypotenuse. Because it is the length of this opposite side, because it goes from 0 all the way up to 16. Okay, cool. So in SOHCAHTOA, I know some of you might be using the formula triangles. I'm not going to use those, but it's totally fine if you do. I cross out the side I don't care about. So I want O, I have H, so I don't care about A at all. So if I cross out the ones with A, I know I'm using So that is sine 30, which you should technically know, but it is a calculator paper, so I don't really care if you don't know it. It means that O is equal to 16 sine 30, which is, I mean, again, you can use a calculator, but technically it is one you're supposed to know. 16 sine 30, 8, because sine 30 is a half. I know it looks like I've written 0 equals 8, but I promise you I haven't. So that opposite side is 8. So now my equation for the circle is going to be 3p squared plus p squared equals 8 squared, which is 64, because remember, that's our radius. So now we have 9p squared plus p squared equals 64. 10p squared equals 64. Don't square root, because if you square root, you will get your 8, but this 10 would have to be square rooted as well. So I prefer to divide by 10 first. 2.52, is that the square root of this? I feel like I've done this before. Alright, 2.53, alright, fair enough. But it says to one decimal place, so 2.5. Quite a short question if you think about it. It's just not the easiest thing in the world, to be honest. But hopefully, again, I've been very honest. I didn't know what to do. So how would I approach it? That's the question I'm always asking myself. Why did they give me the information they've given me? I have to use it at some point. Where? In fact, if you want in the comments, which piece of information did I not use? Every question I've ever done, I've used all of the information. Because that's why they give it to you. Another circle question. Shocker, right? Circle geometry is, you know, grade 9. So it kind of makes sense that a lot of questions are based on that. And I do think it's something that a lot of students struggle with. Now, with this one, find the equation of the tangent to the point P. I don't think this is particularly difficult, if I'm being completely honest. But the problem here is they haven't given you the diagram. And a lot of students won't use a diagram, and then they get the wrong answer. Now, yes, a lot of students will not use a diagram and get the right answer too. But I would always recommend, especially if any of you want to do A-level maths, I would highly recommend drawing a diagram. By the way, just as a quick aside, if they ever ask you to draw a graph that looks like this, x squared plus y squared equals whatever, so 4, 16, 25, whatever it is, you have to use a compass. So in this case, I would have to stretch it out to the point 4 and then draw a circle, just as a random aside there. And then we have our point P along here, which is, you know what, I realised I probably should have drawn the tangent first and then did the point, but you know what, we all make mistakes, it's fine. Sure, it doesn't have to be super accurate. And we want to find the equation of the tangent. From here, I'm willing to bet quite a few of you are actually okay. You find the gradient of the radius, negative reciprocal, sub in the coordinate, and you're done. 3/2. Now I will say that the numbers are actually really ugly in this case. But let's start with the gradient. I'm going to say MR for gradient of the radius. It's the change in y of the change in x, so root 7/2 minus nothing. And you can put this all in a calculator, by the way. It's completely legal. Or you can use the divide sign if you're really like unsure of using fractions on fractions. And we have 3 over 2 minus 0 root 7 over 3. There you go. Which means my gradient of the tangent, let's call it mt, is negative 3 over root 7. Sub that into y equals mx plus c. I feel like we've used this equation quite a bit. And we have. Is minus 3 over root 7 x plus c. So now we just need to find out what c is. So I'm going to move that over to the other side. So we have y plus 3 over root 7. And by the way, if this part confuses you about how I've moved it over first, I would like to point out it doesn't matter which order you sub things, like you move things and then sub in, or you sub in then move it. It doesn't make a difference. Okay, think mathematically. Have I done anything illegal going from here to here? If the answer is no, then you can do it. Then all I'm doing is subbing in the coordinates, so I can be super lazy here. X is, in fact, let me get rid of this, and that gives me the calculator call, 3 over 2. So we have y, which is root 7 over 2. Then we have plus 3 over root 7, which is absolutely disgusting, but is what it is, times x, which is 3 over 2. What an absolutely hideous answer that is. But that's okay, because it is correct. Root 7 over 7. So our equation is y is equal to minus 3 over root 7x plus 8 root 7 over 7. What a question. What a question. By the way, that was only 3 marks, which I think is kind of funny. So I don't want to spend too long on it, but hopefully you can see diagrams do help. I would thoroughly recommend drawing diagrams, especially if you want to do A-level maths or A-level physics. Diagrams are going to save your life next year. Here's a question that I don't think is, again, I think it is a good question, and it has some parts in it that I really want to go through. But this question was also really poorly answered. So we have here a rectangle, this ABDE shape in the middle, and 2 congruent. Remember, congruent means that they are identical, so they are the exact same. Imagine copying and pasting, right? If I selected this, copy, paste, that's basically what's happened. They've just rotated it, that's completely fine. And they tell me that the area of this middle rectangle is equal to the area of the 2 triangles added together, and they give me a ratio, work out the length of AE. So it's actually not that bad once you really break it down. Whenever they give you an equation like this, just know that's your first step. You're going to work out an expression for the area of the rectangle and the 2 triangles. Always, without a doubt. So it's really, really nice that they give you this. But again, it's not really explained very well when people teach this. Is that if they give you an equation, all you want to do is try and work out the different parts of the equation. So what's the area of the rectangle? Well, if I look at this, well, the area of any rectangle is its width times its length, or base times height, however you want to call it, but it's the 2 dimensions. I don't know what those are. However, it does give me this ratio where AB is 1 part and AE is 3 parts. Now, because I don't know what on earth the part is, because I don't know how what the actual length is, I'm going to say that 1 part is equal to x, because I don't know what it is. So AB is 1 part, so it's x, AE is 3x. That's it. So the area of that rectangle is just equal to x times 3x. Now, sometimes when people look at mark schemes, or when a teacher goes through it, or someone else on YouTube goes through it, whatever, some people say to me, oh, there was this method, will it also work? The answer is yeah. So there are, I could have labelled this side x and this side 1 over 3x, and I'd get the same answer eventually. So that doesn't matter too much. Now the area of the triangles, well, it says 2 triangles, but they're the same. So if they're the same, I can just say the area of the triangle, in fact, I'm going to write triangles, plural, is just 2 times the area of 1 triangle, right? Because they're the same. It won't make a difference. Now, how do you work out the area of a triangle? Now, I know some of you are going to say base times height divided by 2. The problem here is I don't know the base, and I don't know if I know the vertical height, because this might not be a right angle. So instead, we're going to use the formula that is given to you on the formula sheet, half AB sine C. Now, in a triangle, what are A, B, and C? C is just any one of the angles, and A and B are the sides that create that angle. So in this case, for example, or in this case, whatever one you want to do, it'd be 24 and 3x make the angle 30 degrees. So it's going to be a half. I'm just going to say is 24, it doesn't really matter, times 3x sine 30. Now, of course, the 2 times a half is going to cancel. Sine 30 is equal to a half, as you already know. To be honest, you can just... I don't know why I'm trying to do it without a calculator. I'm so used to teaching with that one. But you'd have 24 times 3 times sine 30. Sine 30 is a half, as we know from earlier in the video. And that's going to give me the number in front of x. So 36x. And now we know that those two things are equal to each other. So 3x squared equals 36x. Now it's telling me to work out the length AE. Well, AE is 3 times x. All I'm trying to do is work out what 3 times x is. I've just realised I can do that really quickly. I can just do 3x equals 36. Huh. Okay, fair enough. I was going to say that you can work out what x is and then times it by 3. But when in Rome, I've labelled that as 3x. 3x equals 36 centimetres. All done for 4 marks. So... not too bad, but it does have loads of different elements which can be a bit tricky for students. And of course, it's just about using this equation in order to work out your answer. So for this question, we have 2 3 markers, and it gives us the area of the parallelogram is greater than 15 centimeters squared. So with a question like this, when you work out the area of a parallelogram, it's important to note that normally it's the perpendicular height times the base. But in this case, we don't know and we can't really work out the perpendicular height. So instead, what you're going to do is you're going to cut it in 2. And the reason why this works is because in a parallelogram, the opposite sides are equal to each other, like this. And that also means that the angles are equal to each other. So in other words, these are 2 congruent triangles. They're identical. So we're going to use a similar technique to what we did before. We're going to say a half AB sine C, so 10 minus x, 2x minus 1, sine of 150, and it says it must be greater than 15 centimeters squared. And then all we're going to do is expand and simplify and show that it can be written in this form. So what is sine 150? I actually can't remember off the top of my head. Oh, it's a half again, of course it is. Oh yeah, of course it is, whoops. So that's also a half, intriguing. So we're going to have a half times a half. So it's going to be 1 over 4, 10 minus x, 2x minus 1, is greater than 15. So I'm going to times both sides by 4 in order to get rid of the fraction. This is the same as dividing by a quarter, just in case anyone is curious. And then 60. Then we can expand. So we're going to have minus x times 2x, gives me minus 2x squared. Then we're going to have 20x plus x, which is 21x. And lastly, we're going to have minus 1 times 10, which is minus 10. Yes. Okay, that should be totally fine. And is greater than 60. Now, there is one thing that we also should bear in mind. Is this equation here is for the equation of one of the triangles, but we're looking for 2 identical triangles, so we do need to times this by 2. So at the end, we're going to times this by 2 to get minus 4x squared plus 42x minus 20 greater than 60. And all we need to do is move everything over to the right-hand side. So 4x squared minus 42x plus 80 is less than 0, because again we've moved it all over to the right hand side. Now this looks like this, but it's 2 times bigger. So if I divide everything by 2, you get your final answer of 2x squared minus 21x plus 40 is less than 0. This is find the range of possible values. Now here what you want to do is either factorize, quadratic formula, whatever it takes to work out your actual values where it equals to x. So depending on what you do, again, quadratic formula, factorizing, whatever you want, you get 2 values. Just so you know, the values if you factorize are going to be this, if that's what you want to do. But again, I would recommend just using the quadratic formula. Now we need to decide if it's going to be inside or outside the range. Because don't forget, this here is an inequality. So if I sketch this out, we have 2.5 over here, we have 8 over here. We want the values where it's below 0. So in other words, it needs to be below the x-axis, which is the values in between 2.5 and 8. Just like that. For 6 marks, I don't think that's too bad either. Bearings. Yeah, definitely something that sucks quite a lot. So, the nice thing about this question is they do give you a bit of a hint on how they word bearings. So if you look at the first part here, it says Barston is 8 kilometers from Acton on a bearing of 37 degrees. So Barston is on a bearing of 37. If you notice where the number 37 is, it's clockwise from the second town they named, right? So they started at Acton, 37 degrees. They do the same thing with the next one. Chorlton from Barston is 150 degrees. So Chorlton from Barston, so you start at B, 150 degrees. But we need to find the bearing of Chorlton from Acton. So that is going to be clockwise from A all the way down to C. So we actually do need to add another line here. It's going to be this total angle there. Okay, so how do we work it out? Well, if I'm going to go through this, one thing that you should note, and this is something I don't see many students kind of noticing, is when you have bearings, the north lines are all parallel to each other. So in other words, these are angles on parallel lines. And the most common one that you'll have to use is the C angles, the co-interior angles. Right? Because if you look at it, it's like an upside down C. I mean, it's a U shape, right? That means 37 plus this angle equals 180. So that angle at B is 180 minus 37, which is 143 degrees. And it's the only way to do this question, by the way. That means the angle on the inside is going to be, well, they should add up to 360. So 360 minus 143 minus 150. So 360 minus 150 is 210, minus 143 is 67 degrees. Here. Now, how on earth am I going to work out this angle here? Because if you notice, if I work out the inside bit of this angle here, just the part inside the triangle, I can add it to 37 to get my bearing. Now, how am I going to do that? Well, the thing that pops to my mind is I have two sides and the angle between them, which means I'm thinking cosine rule. But what would we work out? Well, that means we would work out what AC is, right? If I knew AC, I would have an angle and a pair. I'd have the angle and the side, a pair. And I'd have the side, and I could work out the opposite angle using the sine rule. So that's the method here. B squared plus C squared minus 2BC cos A. The only letters that matter in the cosine rule are the lowercase a and the capital A. The lowercase a and the capital A have to be opposite each other. Capital A is the angle you have. Lowercase a is the side you're working out. So I'm just going to do it all on the calculator because, you know, I'm cool like that. So B squared, I'm going to say B and C. B is 8, C is 9. So we have 8 squared plus 9 squared minus 2, 8 times 9 cos 67. Square root the answer, and we get 9.42. And then if we're using the sine rule, that's just, if we're working out a angle, I like to put the angle on top. So again, it's an angle and its opposite side equals the angle and its opposite side. So here I'm just going to call this one B. So what we have is sine 67. By the way, with this 9.42, I'm just going to keep it as the answer button just to make my life a bit easier. Over 9.42, but again we're using the answer button, equals sine of the angle B over 9. So sine B is just 9. Again, all I've done is I've moved the 9 up. Sine 67, 9.42, which means B is equal to, and then we're going to work it out. So we have 9 sine 67 over the answer. Then we're going to do inverse sine. We get 61, and it says to one decimal place, so we're going to do 61.6 degrees. But remember, that's not the whole bearing yet. The bearing is going to be 61.6 plus 37. Right, bearing plus 37, which is 98.6 degrees. But remember, bearings have to be given as 3-digit numbers, so 098.6 degrees. That's it for 5 marks. The reason why it's 5 marks is because you have to use the cosine and the sine rule. Bit tricky, but remember this kind of trick here. And also remember that in a lot of bearing questions, especially when you have a triangle, you're going to be using the sine and the cosine rule, for sure. Second to last question, hopefully you found this useful so far. But we have this, the dreaded circles. If you look back at the last few years, especially kind of 2022 and before, they had circle questions as the last question all the damn time. It's crazy. But there is one trick that will save your life with these circle questions. So what we're trying to do, we're trying to work out the area of the rectangle. That means it's going to be the width times the length, right? Now the width is quite easy. The radius is 24, so that means this is 24. This is another 24. This is another 24. And this is another 24. So that means the width is quite easy. It's just 4 times 24, which is 96 millimeters. Cool. I'm actually going to get rid of this now. So we know what the width is. That's all well and good. But the height is the problem. Because if I look at the height of this, the length, well, we have 24 over here. But we don't know this opposite side here. Now we do actually know that from here to here is another 24 millimeters, because don't forget that's just the radius of the circle, right? If you look, it's going to be the same length as that line there. But we don't know the middle length. It's not 2 times the radius. So what's the trick with these questions? With these questions we have circles, you always just join up these centers of the circle, and that will make, so if I draw out that triangle now, okay, it should be an equilateral triangle where all of the sides are equal length and all of the angles are 60 degrees. So how does that help me? Well, if I zoom in a bit, that opposite side, I can call that side H. I know that the bottom is just 24 millimeters, and I know that the hypotenuse is going to be 48 millimeters, because again, that is 2 times the radius. That's the height. That, because we've cut this triangle in half using this blue dotted line, it's only going to be 24 millimeters. So that is just good old-fashioned trigonometry. And remember, this angle here is going to be 60 degrees because it's an equilateral triangle. So opposite and adjacent, or opposite and hypotenuse, it doesn't make a difference. We have sine 60 equals h over 48. If you used tan, you would get the same answer. So that's kind of cool. So h is just equal to 48 sine 60. So that means the height, or the length of this shape, is 24 plus 24, so that's 48, plus another 48 sine 60. So if I want to work out the area is just those two things times by each other. So it's going to be 96 times 48 plus 48 sine 60. And that will give us our final answer. 96 times, you don't really need the times to be honest, 48 plus 48 sine 60 gives me 8,500 blah blah blah, but it says to 3 SF. So that's 8,600 millimeters squared. Just so you know, that was a 4-mark question. But again, if they ever give you 3 circles in this arrangement, or 5 circles in the arrangement, or whatever, join up their centers to make equilateral triangles. That is the hack they want you to use. And for the final question today, I do quite like this question, because the way I teach it normally, or the way I've gone through it before, is not the only way to do it. So I'm going to show you 2 ways to get to the same answer. So we have 2 right angle triangles, and they give us a bunch of algebra. Yeah, whoop-de-doo. Given that tan E equals tan F, find the value of X. Now, one way of doing this, which is kind of the new way I've seen, is that if tan E equals tan F, it means that these angles are actually the same, which means that these 2 triangles are actually similar triangles. They're actually the same shape, just enlarged, which means they have a scale factor between them. So, again, that means they are similar triangles because they have the same angle, which means all three angles would be the same, right? Because this angle would also be the same, because this is 90, and they all add up to 180. So, in other words, if I wanted to work out the scale factor from this triangle to this triangle, well, all I would do is I would take the corresponding sides and divide them. So 12x plus 31 over 4x minus 1. And that would equal, and actually before I put the equal sign, the other way to work out the scale factor is to take this corresponding side and divide it. And because we know that they're a similar triangle, these two should be equal to each other. That's one way. The other way is to remember that tan is equal to opposite over adjacent. So in other words, this tan E would be x over 4x minus 1, and this tan F would be 6x plus 5 over 12x plus 31, which is the way I used to do it, and those two are equal. Now I know you're probably looking at this and thinking those two are not the same, but they are. You can rearrange this to get this equation. All they've done, if you look, is they moved the 12x plus 31 up to the top and the x down to the bottom, which is fine. Times both sides by 12x plus 31, divide both sides by x, and you actually get this. Either way you want to do it, and now it's just a matter of solving. So again, cross multiplying either way, you get 12x plus 31 equals, there's no real easy way to write this. Expand, simplify, do all that fun stuff. So we get 12x squared plus 31x equals 24x squared. And that would be 20x minus 6x, so that would be 14x, and then minus 5. I'm going to move everything over to the right hand side. So we get 0 equals 12x squared plus, minus 17x minus 5. Okay, cool. Solving, again, you can use quadratic formula. I wouldn't recommend factorising, especially with this because it's quite big, or using your calculator, however you want to do it, but just quadratic formula. We have 12, negative 17, negative 5. We get 5 over 3. And of course, we're going to get another side as well. Negative 1 over 4. And the key point to realise here is there's only one value of x. Because x is a length, it cannot be negative. So x must equal 5 over 3. So, I hope you found that quite useful. Let me know which question you found the hardest, and let me know if you want me to kind of do more questions like, don't die please. Okay, and if you want me to do more questions like it or anything like that. But again, it's all about practicing the problem solving. Most of the maths that we do is not too tricky. I know all of you know how to solve quadratics. You guys know how to use the sine and cosine rule. If you don't, then practice that. But it's the application which is where you're going to lose most of the marks. And that's why I want to kind of keep going through these. I do have also the grade 9 paper 2, but in my opinion it's not too tricky. So I'm still going to upload it, still going to show you it. But again, look back at the set 1 and 2, grade 9 paper 2s and 3s, because those are where you get the really meaty, difficult questions. Other than that, best of luck for whatever exam you have next, and I'll see you in the next one.